Good afternoon, everybody. What? Where did that come from? It's the last session of the day. Come on, yeah! Hey, I also delivered the first session of the day today, okay? So I've been doing this since 8:30 this morning. You got nothing to complain about. No, just... Thank you for coming all the way down to the end of the building. I was worried I was going to be late because I'm like, wow, it's this far? My name is Chuck Heinzelman. I am a senior program manager with Microsoft. I am a member of what used to be known as the SQL Server Customer Advisory Team. We're now known as Azure Cat because we are doing much more than just SQL Server these days. I am joined by a colleague of mine, Khalid Moose. I will let him introduce himself when he comes up on stage. We're here to talk about the best practices and lessons learned from running SQL Server in Windows Azure virtual machines. When I work with presenters that are new to this, first-time presenters, I always stress that they need to put this slide in, and this is what I call the invitation to leave. Okay? I have to be here. For you guys, there's like 5 million other sessions that are going on. So I want to make sure right up front that you understand what we're talking about in this session. And I will not be too offended if you decide to go someplace else because this isn't what you expected. So we're here to talk about infrastructure as a service. I think that's fairly obvious. But we're going to talk about different things related to infrastructure as a service. We're going to talk about some of the HADR considerations. We're going to spend a good deal of time dealing with the terminology around infrastructure as a service so that everyone has the same level playing field. Because I know it's a new concept to a lot of people. I'm just going to warn you. We're going to probably take the first 10 minutes of the session to just talk about Azure infrastructure as a service and the terminology and that type of thing. So who in here has played with Azure infrastructure as a service? A couple. You two don't count. How many of you would consider yourselves experts in like the terminology and vocabulary around it? Someone that kind of said, so if you don't want to hear that over again, the first 10 minutes are going to be based around that. I know there's a Starbucks downstairs. Feel free to go get a coffee. If you do go, I take a venti mocha. So, no, just kidding. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to go into the different pieces. We're going to talk about how to use the images that are out there, the licensing behind them, and a bunch of different things. So it's going to be we got a lot of demos planned, a lot of information coming at you. It's going to be drinking from the fire hose. Okay? All right. With that, the first thing I want to talk about is the Windows Azure virtual machines for the DBA. And this is the overview of what is available in our Windows Azure infrastructure offering. Okay, so the first thing we need to talk about is some of the terminology. And this term and another term I will use later it bothers me as a DBA. Okay? I see affinity group. Later I will be talking about availability sets. Why would that be confusing to a DBA? Well, always on has availability groups. So it's one term in always on that's split into two different terms that mean completely different things in Windows Azure virtual machines. Okay? Takes a while to get used to. Affinity groups, think of them as a container for all of your different objects. We're going to talk here about virtual networks. We are going to talk about virtual machines. We are going to talk about storage. An affinity group is a grouping of all of these different objects. And what it does is it tells Azure, the controllers in Azure that determine where to put all this stuff in the data center, it tells them how to deal with your objects behind the scenes. This isn't anything you have to worry about, but behind the scenes, it takes things in the affinity group and puts them in the optimal, proper places. Okay? So just know that you want to, if you have things that are related to a single application, are related to each other, you want to put them in a common affinity group. So virtual machines use storage. You want to have the virtual machine and the storage live in the same affinity group. Okay? Networks. We have virtual networks, we have local networks, and we have DNS servers. In Azure, you can define your own VNet. You define an address space, you define subnets, you define DNS servers. This is your playground. It's not shared with other people. This is your subnet. This is your address space. In your Azure subscription, you can have multiple VNets that have the same address space because they're separate from each other. One thing you want to know when you're defining your networks, you can add subnets after you deploy objects into your networks. The big thing that you can't change is the address space. So if you define a 172.16.00/16 address space, and later decide that you want that to be a different address space, you cannot change that once you have machines deployed into that network. So you need to really think out your network design up front, whether it's if you know that stuff inside and out, or working with your IT department who knows that stuff inside and out. You want to make sure the network is set up properly to begin with. Local networks, this is very interesting because you can set up connections from your on-prem environment into your Azure VNet. There are multiple ways you can do it. You can do a permanent VPN tunnel between a supported on-prem VPN device and your VNet. That's a permanent tunnel where you can actually join your cloud-based VMs to your local domain. Or you can put a replicated domain controller up there, or you can put a new domain controller and a new forest up there and trust between your on-prem and your cloud domain. The option is yours. The choice is yours. You can also do what's called a point-to-site VPN. This is in preview right now. It's not released code, but it's really powerful where from my local machine, I can VPN into my virtual network. And when I'm VPN'd into my virtual network in Azure, I get a local IP address on Azure, and I can address all of my virtual machines by name. So I can do remote desktop right into them. I can copy files right up to them, as if I were VPN'd into, say, my corporate network. Very, very powerful. Even though it's in preview, I'm using it extensively, and it works quite well. It's a certificate-based authentication. I don't have to enter passwords. It's really nice. And then DNS servers, if you have, say, your own domain up in Azure, you can set that domain controller up as a DNS server, and in your virtual network configuration, set up, say, okay, 172.16.2.4 is a DNS server, and that will act as a DNS server on your network. One thing you need to know about Azure virtual machines, they have to be DHCP. But the lease on that IP address is virtually forever. Okay? So it's kind of like being a static IP, but it is assigned by Windows Azure, not by your domain controllers, not by anything else. They have to be DHCP'd. Okay? A cloud service. Now, a cloud service is a container that has a public endpoint. And by public endpoint, I really mean it has a public IP address and a public DNS entry. One of the demo environments I have for this conference, the cloud service is called techedbi.cloudapp.net. I can, from any machine connected to the internet, get to that DNS entry, and I can get to the IP address, and through that, I can poke holes in it like a firewall to get at the machines behind it. Okay? So you have a cloud service, you tie a network to your cloud service, and then deploy machines into it. We'll talk about that in a little bit when I go into the portal. Storage accounts. I mentioned that you have storage. Storage is Windows Azure page blobs. You upload VHDs, you work with VHDs as blobs. To your virtual machine, they look like a drive. No different than if you were using Hyper-V or VMware. In the machine, it looks like a drive. Looks like a duck, quacks like a duck. No difference there. Folders in your storage accounts are called containers, just so you know the terminology. And each storage account has 2 access keys. These are ginormous keys, letters, numbers, symbols, you aren't going to guess this if you tried kind of thing. And those keys can be used by third-party tools to actually go in and connect your storage account remotely over the internet. Your keys can be regenerated. I mentioned that you have two. One of them is a primary, one of them is a secondary. There's really no difference in functionality between the keys. It's just we needed something to call them. So there are two separate keys that you can regenerate independently. So if one of them gets compromised, you can regenerate that key. Okay? And then the virtual machines themselves. I mentioned that we have disks, VHDs, that you can work with and upload into storage, and the virtual machine image itself, which I will talk about a little bit more in the portal. But one thing to remember is we do not support the VHDX format. These are all VHD files that we have to deal with. So what I'm going to do really quick is I'm going to dump into the Azure Management Portal once I get Eeyore off the screen. So this is my Azure Management Portal for the work and the demos I've been doing this week. So we can see here, and just to give you a little tour real quick around where all these different things are, because it's not intuitive for some of them, believe me. Affinity groups is under settings. I wouldn't have put it there, but that's where it is. That's why I want to just give you a little tour of the things that we just talked about. So you come into settings and you create an affinity group. So like I have my, I'll zoom in on this, my TechEd BI affinity group. That's the one I was using this morning. And then from there, you create all your other objects. So I can then go in and create a network. Where's my network? There it is. And if I look at my network properties in the dashboard here, we can see, if I go to configure, it doesn't like me. Okay, the network is all configurable right from within the portal, or you can also do this through XML files. So you can see here I've got 2 DNS servers defined on my network. I've got various subnets and address spaces. So this is a /17 address space with several subnets carved out of it that I put my machines into. Now note, you might be expecting that with like a /29 subnet, you'd get 6 IP addresses that are usable. In Azure, you get 3. For each subnet that you define, take the number of usable IP addresses that you think you will get and subtract 3. Okay? Those are used for Azure's internal purposes. Do not make the assumption that the first machine you deploy into that will get the 4th IP address, though. That's how it happens to work now. Do not assume that it will always work that way. Okay? That brings up another thing that actually burned me a couple weeks ago. The scripts I used 2 months ago to generate an environment similar to what I demo here had a best practice outlined of putting SQL Server's tempdb on the D drive. Every virtual machine gets a temporary drive called D. Our best practice was, at the time, that you should put the tempdb files on the D drive because it was faster. When we went GA, we actually reversed that best practice. It is no longer a best practice to put your tempdb files there. And the reason I bring this up is because we're all used to living in a world where things change slowly over time. How many SQL 2005 best practices still apply to SQL 2012? Most of them. Many of them. It doesn't change that quick in a traditional IT world. In Azure, things change very quickly. And you need to stay on top of what's going on with the platform, because changes to the platform will affect the SQL Server best practices that we have to put out, just like the tempdb location. The best way to stay on top of the changes to the platform that I've found, monitor Scott Guthrie's blog. Whenever we put out major changes to the Azure platform, Scott blogs about it. He's in charge of that whole group at Microsoft. He's the one that's putting out that message. So when you need to monitor a blog for changes, start with his and go from there, and then look at, so he'll tell you what has been done, then you can dig into the MSDN documentation to see if it affects you or if we have updated our best practices based on it. Okay? Scott Guthrie, sometimes known as Scott Goo. Yep. It's one of the annoying things about, life inside of Microsoft. We refer to each other by our login aliases. You'll write an email and Charles He, who's that? Oh, that's Chuck. Oh, never mind. So, these are our virtual networks. And just to kind of give you a little tour around some of the other things, storage accounts. I have many storage accounts here. Virtual machines, and this is all documented online, and it changes often, so I don't talk directly about it. There are throughput limits for max number of I/O per virtual or per storage account. Your disks and that, it's really a performance tuning exercise. I know SQL Cat just published a white paper about, in conjunction with the product group, about performance on Azure for SQL Server. You can find it at sqlcat.com. Good paper to reference for looking at different performance issues and things. So the virtual machine itself, this is where I really want to get into the meat of things. The virtual machine is the heart of what you're building. And the thing I really want to stress to you is that once it's built, it's not really much different than a virtual machine in your data center. You interact with it, you own the operating system, you own the patching, you own everything. It's a virtual machine. The only thing you don't own is the infrastructure that it runs on. So from that standpoint, it's not different than a regular virtual machine. But the infrastructure here, I have a bunch of different options here. I can attach disks, I can detach disks. Think of this portal here and the associated PowerShell scripts like what you would do in Hyper-V Manager when you want to add a disk to a VM. You go into Hyper-V Manager, you create a VHD, you add it to the VM, you go into the VM and format it. You do the same thing here. It's just that it's being done, the VHD is stored in Azure Blob Store instead of on your SAN, and it's attached virtually through the network. Same concepts, different view of life. Okay? Any questions before I move on? Seeing none, let's duck back into the PowerPoint slides for a little while. I need to talk to you a little bit about deployment and licensing. So we have, out in the Azure portal, we have several what we call gallery images. There are gallery images that are just Windows Server. There are gallery images that are Windows Server with SQL Server on top of it. There are gallery images for SharePoint. There are gallery images for Linux. There's gallery images for a lot of different things. Okay? Those images, specifically the SQL Server images, have licensing implications. For Windows Server, on all these images, you're paying by the hour. You're charged for usage. You don't have to have a Windows Server license to spin one of these up. You spin up a machine, the rate that you pay to use that machine includes the operating system license. With SQL Server, if you use one of our SQL Server gallery images, there's a web edition, there's a standard edition, there's an enterprise edition. The rate that you pay for that virtual machine includes the SQL licensing. Very important. Who here knows what license portability is, or license mobility? Okay, one person. Unless the lights are blinding me, I can't see the people in the back row. License mobility allows you, if you have the appropriate agreement in place, to take license that you bought for on-prem use and actually move them and use them in Azure virtual machines. License mobility does not work with the SQL Server gallery images because you're charged the rate for usage. And you can't get away from that. If you are using license mobility, you want to start with a Windows Server gallery image. And now, okay, I have to say this. This is what the rules are right now, 5:30 or whatever it is, today in New Orleans. Okay? This could change tomorrow. It could change next week. So the recording here could be dated, whenever they decide to change these rules. But the Windows Server Gallery images, you can then install SQL Server on them and use your license mobility if you have that agreement in place with your software assurance. Okay? Different things to think about. You can create your own images. If you have a machine, a virtual machine that you're running on-prem that you just want to host in the cloud, as long as your licensing permits you moving to the cloud, because there are different licenses for different software, I won't go into all the specifics, you can take that VHD, upload it into Azure, create a virtual machine definition around it, and start running it, just like you would with Hyper-V. You can create a sysprepped VM image and upload that into Azure, and use that as a template to create multiple virtual machines in the cloud. Or you can build a new machine in the cloud, sysprep it, and then create an image off of it, which is my preferred way of doing things. That's how I like to do it. I don't want to build a full Windows Server machine on-prem, patch it, install all my software, patch all my software, and then upload a 40 or 50 gig VHD to the cloud. I would rather say start with the VHD, the Windows Gallery image, patch it. Download speeds in the cloud are actually fairly nice. I downloaded something from MSDN onto one of my virtual machine images the other day. I was getting like 20 megasecond downloads. It was amazing. I can get my bits very effectively there. Or in my case, I have a VHD in the cloud in my blob storage that contains all of my bits that I regularly install. It has the ISO images. I can take that VHD and attach it to whatever VM I'm working on where I need those bits. I don't have to copy them over the wire. I just say, use that VHD. So when I'm done building the machine up there, I sysprep it, then I turn it into an image. And I'll show you, not the sysprep process because it takes a while, but I will show you how to do that in the portal. And we will go into that right now. So there's a couple things that we can do here. The first thing that we can do is upload our own VHD, whether it's sysprepped or whether it's not sysprepped. The upload process is the same. You're uploading a VHD file. And that's what this first command is here, this add Azure VHD. I give it a destination, which is a path in blob storage. Note, I can go over HTTPS, so it can be encrypted with SSL. I give it the local file path and tell it how many upload threads to use. If I execute this command, it's going to take that TechEd VHD out of my temp directory on my C drive and upload it into Azure Blob Storage where I told it to put it. I will not run this command here because it does take a while to upload. I can't get around the laws of physics. I don't have Mr. Scott here with me. But, like any good cooking show, I already have a couple VHDs uploaded that I'm going to use for the rest of the demo. So, once you get the VHD up there, what you do with it next depends on what kind of VHD it is. Is it a sysprepped VHD that I want to use as an image? Or is it a VHD of an existing VM that I'm just lifting and shifting and running in the cloud? Let me go into the portal real quick and show you something before I just want to do the proof before I actually run these commands. So if I come to new virtual machine from gallery, you can see here, I'll zoom in on it, I have two options here. I have the platform images, which are what I already talked about, and I have my images and my disks. You might be asking yourself, Chuck, what are the difference between my images and my disks? Wow, no one bid on that this morning either. I was hoping someone would say, Chuck. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'll stop trying to make bad jokes, although that's only a joke I know. So under my images, you can see I have two virtualized images already. Images are, these are the sysprepped images I can use to create multiple VMs off of, okay? I created a couple for some things I was doing. I do a lot with SharePoint BI, so I like to have images with SharePoint installed that I can just scale out easily. My disks are the VHDs that I can use to just create a new VM. This is a in place, I'm doing this, okay? So I have none there. Now if I come into PowerShell here, and I do a create disk. Now my TechEd P2V demo disk, coming out of that media location, I give it a label, I tell it this OS is Windows. The OS flag is the key to this PowerShell command. That's what tells this function, this PowerShell command, that this is a bootable image. If you did not put that on there, it would just make a disk out of it that you could attach to an existing VM. This is what tells it to show it in that list of disks that I'm going to create a new VM off of. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this command. And it should finish shortly because I have a good network connection here. Okay, it shows operation status succeeded. Now, it sometimes takes a little while to refresh in the portal, depending on the refresh cycle of the portal itself. Let's see if it showed up in here. And you can also come to your virtual machines, and you have a disks tab. So it doesn't show up here yet. Let me refresh this, see if it shows up. So what that did is that took that VHD that was in my blob store and created an Azure disk off of it and marked it as having an operating system. So I can take that Azure disk and make a VM out of it. Okay, there we go. The P2V demo is right there. So now if I come in and do a new virtual machine from gallery, I can see under my disks, there's that disk that I created. So if I create a new VM, it's going to use this disk as that VM, as the template for that VM. So the next PowerShell command that I have is the add Azure image. And what this is going to do is it's going to take that sysprepped VHD that I uploaded and turn it into an image that I can use to make more VMs off of it. Okay? So if I run this, and it comes back and says succeeded. Yay, succeeded. All right. So now if I come in and do a new from gallery and come to my images, let me refresh this because I'm impatient. So now when I come in and do a new new gallery from my images, and I'm being impatient. I must wait. I must learn patience. There we go. Okay, so new compute virtual machine from gallery, my images. Right there. That's the one I just created with that PowerShell command. Most things you'll learn can be done either through PowerShell or through script or through the portal. There are some things that can only be done through PowerShell. There are some things right now that can only be done through the portal. Some of the stuff with the point-to-site VPN, they don't have the PowerShell commandlets written because it's in preview. They haven't gotten to it yet. Personally, I'd rather they spend the time on the feature, and they'll get to the commandlets by whenever they can. So the last thing I want to show you in the portal here is the ability to take a machine and create an image off of it. So if I built, let's say that this machine here was a machine that I built in the cloud and then sysprepped. So I want to turn this into an image. What I can do is I can select it once it's shut down. It has to be shut down to do this. I come down to my capture, and I give it an image name and say that I have run sysprep on this virtual machine. What that's going to do is it's going to delete the VM definition and turn this machine into a template that I can use to create other virtual machines. Okay? This is the tour around the management of VMs. I do all of this through PowerShell. I hardly use the portal for the VM creation because there's a lot more that you can do. It's a lot more flexible. In my PowerShell command, I can say, instantiate this VM, and automatically join this domain. I can't do that kind of thing through the portal. But there are some great PowerShell commands, and they're well documented on MSDN for this type of thing. So, migration. We already talked about the lift and shift. I want to take a VHD, move it up to the cloud. So you have a SQL Server running on-prem. It's virtualized already. You just want to run it in Azure. You take that VM, you copy it up, you make a new VM definition around it. That's the lift and shift scenario. A hybrid scenario, this is where I have some things on-prem, some things in the cloud. Think of a BI scenario. You have your OLTP transactional system on-prem, but maybe you offload your business intelligence assets into the cloud. Maybe you're doing always-on availability groups with a asynchronous secondary in the cloud for disaster recovery. You don't want to do synchronous between on-prem and the cloud. You just aren't, the latency is going to kill you. And then the obvious one is the full rewrite. So if you have an application on-prem that you want to move into the cloud, you might want to do a full rewrite and have it use Windows Azure SQL database and web and worker roles and some other things. If you want to take on that, like if you were going to rewrite an application anyway, I would suggest looking at maybe doing it in Azure because there's some great functionalities with not only the SQL side of things, but with Azure storage for queues and blobs and tables and a bunch of other things there. So I want to show you one thing, and I'm not going to actually run this demo, but I'm going to show you the scripts because I'm running behind. So I don't want to hold you guys after the, I already thank you for being here during the happy hour that was going on from 5 to 6. So I don't want to keep you past 6:15. So what I have here in Management Studio is a set of commands that works with, this was released in CU2 for SP1 for SQL 2012. Okay? It's called Backup to Cloud. I can have a storage account running in Azure. And that storage account can be the target for my on-prem SQL backups. So what I have to do is I have to create a credential. And this credential has the secret keyword, and that secret is, remember how I told you a storage account has this massively long key? That's what you put in the credential. Then when you do your backup, instead of backup to disk or backup to tape, you back up to URL. And that URL is the storage container in Azure plus the backup file name. You give it the credential so that SQL Server can authenticate up into the cloud and let it run. What I will say is there is not retry. If the connection fails, you're going to drop it and you're going to have to restart your backup. Okay, I will tell you that. So having good connections is critically important for doing this. The question is, have we compared the time to do this backup versus a backup to local disk and then copying up the blob store? Do we have any hard numbers on that? All right. Thank you, sir. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Khalid.
Thank you, Chuck. And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Khalid Moose. I am part of the team that's been program managed in SQL Server, part of the team that was responsible for certifying SQL Server on Windows Azure. So as part of the certification effort, we have learned a lot. And we had some bunch of lessons learned and recommendations that we would like to go over. And then we'll give a couple of demos. So the first section is about connectivity. So let me just get my stuff here. Some high-level recommendations on connectivity. This is basic. Remove unused endpoints on virtual machines. By default, you will get RDP points and remote PowerShell. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to keep them, so you can, or if you use any additional ports for SQL Server to manage SQL Server instances, doesn't mean you have to keep them all the time. So there is risk, obviously, if you keep those. So make sure you are very conscious, especially if you're managing a lot of virtual machines, to have diligence to remove, non-used ports once you don't need them. Use virtual networks instead of public RDP ports to administer your VMs. This is important, especially if you have some kind of enterprise applications. You don't want data to go over the internet, so make sure you actually use virtual networks. And Chuck has gone over, some of the functionality that you could use there. Use VPN channels to connect to database services is even more important for data. If you have applications that is hosting customer data and so on, it is important that you have your own VPN. Otherwise, you are going over the public network. This is more like some scenarios actually were run in our labs when we were doing the certification for SQL Server. Is we designed our virtual network certain way, and then we had to scale our infrastructure. And as part of scaling infrastructure, we had to increase our address space. And it wasn't an easy way to reconfigure your virtual network to add additional space. What we had to do, because we have already provisioned a bunch of VMs and resources on those VPN, we had to tear down everything and add additional space and rebuild the virtual network from scratch, really, which was a big impact for us because we had to tear down all the machines and we had to coordinate it organization-wide, which is not very trivial task. So be very careful when you set up your VPN. Be very conscious and design the network for future as well, because if you have to tear it down, that could be a big impact for your organization. So this is one of the lessons learned that we've learned over time. I think Chuck explained the difference between availability set and affinity groups. Here, this is important, especially if you have committed SLAs. Make sure you actually do configure VMs in availability sets. That way, if there is planned or unplanned outages, your VMs are not totally down, so you have a secondary VM to process your workloads. Affinity groups is important in two aspects. The first aspect is pricing. So if you do, especially in the case if you have a database like multi-tier application, make sure that the database affinity groups will provide you the flexibility to have your data and process in the same data center or as close to each other as you can. Otherwise, if you're doing a lot of transactions to the database, your costs will go up, and also latency. So make sure affinity group give you that flexibility to keep your data and processing together. By defining an affinity group, that will reduce your cost over time, and also the latency if you have to go back and forth between your processing and data. Last but not least, by default, you will get Windows authentication. Doesn't mean you have to keep it. Especially when you go into a domain and in general, you want to switch it probably to mixed mode authentication. We will demonstrate pretty much all of these in the next demo, but let's go over some of the ideas for this demo. To give you some context, here's what I'm going to go over. We have two scenarios. Say you have some large deployments where you have a lot of VMs, but you don't want to manage each VM separately, okay? What you want to do is remote PowerShell to the VMs and manage those databases remotely from probably one central location. So in this case, I've got VM1, and just an example for the demo of VM2. And then I am going to log in only to VM1. I'm going to manage VM2 through remote PowerShell. Okay? So what we will do is we will open a port, which is 1433 by default for SQL. And I will manage VM2, and I will demonstrate how you could do that, how you use remote PowerShell, and how you can configure and reconfigure the database instance in VM2. I'm showing here just two VMs, but this same concepts can work with any number of VMs. It doesn't matter. The second, in this scenario, I have both VMs in the same cloud service, which means there is one public interface to the internet. But in the second scenario, I'm going to show you could do the same thing, even if the VMs are on different cloud service. Okay? So the concept is exactly the same. There is just one small tweak that we will demonstrate in that case. So we'll switch. So here's what I have. So we've got VM1, VM2, and VM3. So let's take a look at the configuration. I already have them set up so we don't spend time provisioning these VMs, given the time that we have for the demo. So here is the endpoints for VM1. So for VM1, the only thing I need is RDP to be able to remote desktop to the VM. For VM2, however, I'm going to need two endpoints. I'm going to need PowerShell to be able to access through a remote PowerShell. I kept remote desktop. I don't actually need it, but I kept it in case something goes wrong during the demo and I need to log into it to debug. And then I opened a port, which I will demonstrate later, for SQL, which is 1433. So it's a port forwarding to 1433, which is used by SQL management. And then VM3, it's similar to VM2, except that it's in different cloud service. And the way you know that, you look at a dashboard. And then in the dashboard, you should see the cloud service where it is at. So this one is in count demo 2. And then demo 2 is in count demo 1, or just count demo. And then VM1 is in count demo. So VM1 and VM2 are in the same cloud service, but VM3 is in count demo 2. Now what we want to do next is go to machine VM1 that I showed you, and I have, because I don't want to spend time typing, I have some PowerShell commandlets already ready. So the first thing we want to do in VM1, so I'll check here. It is my PowerShell command. I'm going to do host name, just to make sure I'm in the right host, because I'm dealing with a bunch of VMs. So I got to be very careful about what VMs I'm in. So here it says I'm in demo VM1. So I'm in the right VM. And then what I'll do is I want to remote PowerShell to VM2. This command is fairly simple. Actually, you just enter PSS session, computer name, and then you give it a port, and you specify the credentials, and then you configure your use of SSL. Once you do that, go in. It will ask me to put a password, so it's not being encoded in the command itself. So I log in. Now I'm in, and I can check host name, and I see demo 2. Now I'm inside demo 2. I can do anything I want from PowerShell to manage demo 2, including managing the database itself. So what I did is I wrote a few scripts, get them ready inside so I don't type. So if I go here, I got a directory. I could either alias these or these commands. So I have a few commands. What I'm going to try to do is remotely open port 1433 and manage my database through SSMS. So what I have is an instance of SSMS. I'll run it here to demonstrate that I can connect. So it's no brainer. I can log into demo 1, no problem. Should be able to. I can see my databases. Now what I want to do, I want to disconnect and try to connect to VM2 or the SQL Server on VM2. I'm using mixed mode authentication, as you noticed. I'm not using Windows authentication for VM2, and that's by design because I'm not logging in to it from the same computer. So if I try to log in, I'm not going to be able to log in because the port is not open. So I just want to demonstrate there is actually a timer of 20 seconds. So it will time out in 20 seconds. It will tell me, there is no connection configured. So it will fail. Then what I'll do is I'll go to remote PowerShell and just run one command and open the port. So basically, I'll add the rule in Windows Server firewall to allow me to have this connection. So as you can see, we see the failure. So I'm not able to connect. Now, what I'll do is I'll run the command. So I'll do add firewall. Add firewall basically just runs this. I'll show you what the command looks like. It's over here. So it's a little, oops, it's not what I want. So basically, it's a nutshell command, firewall, to add a rule. And then I'm telling it to accept incoming traffic at local port 1433 using the standard TCP protocol. And the action is to allow it. That's pretty much what the command says. So I'm opening this port to be able to allow communication to 1433. Once I do that, I can do show. This will give me basically shows what I run. Just tells me exactly what I just mentioned earlier. If I try to connect, I should be able to connect from VM1 to VM2's database instance. So let me try again. There we go. So I'm able to connect now. And I can manage VM2 just as if, I'm inside VM2. Okay? Now, exact same concept with VM3. So if I disconnect, VM3 now is in different cloud service. So VM1, VM2, if you noticed, when I did connect, I didn't have to specify the full name qualifier, DNS qualifier, because they're in the same cloud service. I could just reference VM2 using its name, because they are in the same cloud service. I'm running it from VM1. However, if I want to do it for VM3, I have to specify the whole DNS name qualifier and the port number that I'm trying to reach. And if you remember, if I go to the portal and show you the configuration of VM3, I have that port as the port configured for that connection that is connected to or port forwarded to 1433. So taking a little time, but we don't have to wait for that. Let me switch. Oh, I want to go to endpoints. So it's 57,000 that is port forwarded to 1433, and that's what I'm using. However, because I didn't open it yet, it's again going to fail. So if I try to log in, it will time out after 20 seconds. Then if I go here, we'll wait for it to time out because I haven't opened the ports. Then I go here, and I run the same command. So now I have to exit because I was connected to VM2. So I need to exit out from VM2 and connect or remote PowerShell to VM3. And VM3 is in different cloud service, as I mentioned. As you can see, we just tweak the command to specify the name of the cloud service we're trying to hit. And as you can see it here in the name, it's ConDemo2 and then the port that is associated with the PowerShell. Now, indeed, it timed out. So what I'll do now is I'll connect remote PowerShell. So I'm in. So I can do, oh, actually, I need to put the password. Not yet. All right, now I'm in. So I'll do host name just to confirm. And right here, I see dem3. Then if I try again, oh, no, I just in, but I didn't actually turn on the, open the firewall yet. So let me open the firewall. So I have this add that adds the rule. So this will actually time out. So we'll try again. Now it should be, is it in? Yeah, looks fine. And I guess I may have to there we go. All right, so I'm in now. So I'm able to manage the database instance for VM3. So that's kind of the first demo. What I want to show next is switching. Is how to take advantage of load balancing. Say you have a situation where, did I pick, is it 2? Oh, thank you. Take advantage of load balancing if you have, say you have a machine that you've been using for a while to handle traffic, and then eventually you're trying to kind of scale up that machine as far as processing is concerned, not scale up of the SQL Server itself. What you can do is you can launch another VM and direct traffic to the other machine. Okay? And this could be a scenario where you have some mirroring with the read-only secondary, for example, that you're running some kind of BI applications on it. And then your VM just not able to keep up with traffic. So what you can do, you just open a new VM and then configure a new port that is load balanced. And then Windows Azure behind the scenes will create the load balancing and deal with the load balancing for you. So let's take a quick look at how it would work. So I have a small utility to demonstrate how you can do this. So there's a little program to show you. All it does is it just connects to the database on VM1. And it just asks the SQL server to give me what's your server that you're running on. Very simple demo. Okay? So that's the code. You basically just have a connection string. And then the query itself is just say select, give me server name. Okay? Just to demonstrate how it's going to look like. So if I run it first without doing any load balancing, all the traffic is going to be shown going to VM1. Okay, so let's take a look. So I have, and I wrote like little scripts. So if I do this little script just to rerun that program several times, it just loops and just keeps running the ConDB several times. So if I run it the first time without any load balancing configured, it will just show me it's just hitting VM1. So you can see here, load balance VM1, VM1. So all traffic is going to VM1. All right? Now what I will do is I will go back to the portal. I'll go to VM2. So these are my VMs, VM1 and VM2. I'm going to add a load balancing port. And this should take just a few seconds. So you just go here, add, and then you have to select load balanced option. And then you go next. And then just give it a name. I'll just call it T-SQL port. And then it will know the only port that is available is 58,000. That is forwarded to 14,300. It takes about 30 seconds. Then the port will go up. Once the port is go up, the load balance is configured for you. And then when I rerun that program to ask it, now it will round robin between those instances. And by the way, I'm showing here 2 instances, but you could scale up to any number that you want. All right, it seems like the port is almost done. It's still kind of busy here, telling me it's on progress. But I notice sometimes the portal takes a little while to refresh. So what I'll do is I'll just rerun it. So here, as you can see, all instances or requests has been going to VM1. So if I do it again, it might still go into VM1, and then eventually when VM2 comes in and the load balancing is configured, it will start round robin between those two. So let's see. We will know as soon as it's configured. And we keep an eye on the portal status too. Oh, here we go. It already started here in VM2. So it's kind of did it towards the end. So if I rerun it again, it's round robin between VM1 and VM2. So traffic is kind of load balanced. And you didn't have to do a whole lot. All I had to do is really just create a port and tell it I want to load balance, which is pretty cool, I think. That's that demo. Let's shift some gears and talk about next some other lessons learned on security or some recommendations. This is more like FYI. Windows Update is on by default on your gallery images that Chuck has went over. So all the gallery images by default, you will have Windows Updates already on by default. However, if you do want SQL updates or GDRs to be updated by default, you will need to turn on Microsoft Update by default, because we do not turn on Microsoft Update by default. Some updates do require resets, so it is important that you know this. Even though you have high availability or availability groups defined, this is an update to your guest OS image. So because if you base all your images on the stock image, they are basically configured because they are sysprepped the same way. So all the Windows updates will be programmed to be at the same time. So be very careful. If you have multiple VAs, and this is one of the lessons learned, we learned internally as well, make sure if you have high availability that you do change either the timing or you configure them differently. Otherwise, they will all try to update at the same time, and if that update requires reset, they may reset at the same time. So in that case, even if they are in the same availability group, they're not going to be, they may still go down at the same time. Basic, use strong passwords, avoid administrator. I think the portal enforces this now. But through PowerShell, I don't think it does enforce it. Just keep it does now? Okay, that's good. And then, of course, if you use mixed mode, you still need to configure, SQL database user. So that's also the same kind of things you have to keep an eye on. You can still use SQL Server authentication. So as I mentioned earlier, and we demonstrated earlier, enable database connection encryption. This is not enabled by default. So you need to be aware of this. So make sure if you do need encryption that you turn it on. Speaking of encryption, because the images are based on the same sysprep image, you will need, if you run encryption, you will need to regenerate the service master key, which is used for all, which is the base key for all your encryption. So make sure you regenerate it. And there is the command how to do it. Last but not least, I think we are running a little out of time, but we're going to show some what's coming up on SQL 14. So we're shifting topic a little bit. The scenario here is, say you have databases that you already have on-prem, as we're showing on to the left of the diagram. So you have some corporate network, and you have some backend databases, and you just want to move them. And you don't want to spend a lot of effort doing that. You want to move them to Windows Azure virtual machine. We do have a new utility as part of SSMS that will support this, starting in SQL 14. You can play with this once CTP1 comes out later in the month. What this will show is how actually what happens behind the scenes and how you can get your database migrated to Windows Azure. A lot of these steps you don't have to do. The tool will do it for you. So basically, and I'll demonstrate how to do that in the tool. But let's walk through it. Well, first, you're going to need SQL 14, which will come with this pre-installed, so you don't have to install any other additional clients or anything like that. It will just be part of the SQL 14 build. You will need access to Windows Azure. There is 3 ways to get access to Windows Azure. You can use through the portal, you can download the shared file, or you could use the subscriptions. Okay, in this case, we'll just show we're going to download the subscription file. So we make a request to portal, we download, so that's where we get access to Windows Azure so we can migrate our database. That's the access. Next, we're going to need a VM that has SQL on it because we want to migrate this database to it. Well, we need to configure it with a drive because eventually we're going to need a backup of that database to be on Azure Blob. So we configure a drive that is connected to that blob. We need to configure some ports for communication between Windows Azure public side of things and the private for SQL, which is, I believe the port we are using is 11.436. We have a piece of code that will do this for you. Don't have to do anything. It will unlock those ports to allow the connection from Windows Azure. Then now we need to get into the database that you have on-prem and get some backups. We need to set up a shared file in that same server or another server that that database server has access to. And then the backup will start. So we kick off the backup. We make a copy in that local server. Now we need to transfer that backup into Windows Azure. So the utility will do that for you. It will create a blob, and we'll start the transfer. We transfer the blobs. Now you have the backups in Windows Azure. We reconfigure the machine to point to it, so we're able to transfer the blob and convert it to the database. So we convert that into the SQL database. Now you have the database on Windows Azure, and we tear down everything, clean up, and then at the end you get a report that will show you what happened, okay? And if there's any errors and so on. So let's take a look how it actually works. I'm not going to go through all the steps because the tool does all of them. All I have to do, I'll show you in the GUI on how to get it set up. Okay. So switching here. So I'm going to go to the portal and show you the VMs I'm dealing with. So I've got 3 VMs configured. I've got what I called SSMS. This actually have SQL 14 installed. And the utility is part of SSMS. And I have, this is the backend database. I have it separate because you may have a secured server somewhere in your enterprise that you basically don't want to have access to directly. So I have that configured as deployment 2. And then I have the target virtual machine, which is deployment 3. Okay? So let's go to this SSMS where we're going to kick off this deployment. and connect to it. I guess I'm already connected here. So what I have to do is just run SSMS. So I'll do, oops, it's not the right one. So I need to go here. Okay, oops. It's taking me to the SSMS. As I miss the start button. Why is it taking me here? But it's taking me to my machine. That's why. Lower? Oh. Yeah, but I'm not seeing. Scroll. Oh, here? Oh. Yeah, it's gonna show desktop. That's my desktop. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Oh gosh. So sorry. Well, try. Here we go. It's showing, but
I'll get it for you.
I usually just use the. You got it?
No, not quite.
Thank you. So anyway, that's interesting. You got to practice that. So I go to SSMS. So when I launch it, so you get SQL 14, upcoming TP1. So just a little warning, this is very early bits, so it's not 100% stable, but I'll give it a shot. So when I log in, basically I'm logging into the backend database. So I already configured the connection to be able to access the database. I have a couple here. I'll try select one of these databases, and then you just go right-click, go to tasks, and then you'll see. And then you'll see the option to migrate, deploy database to Windows Azure VM. That's the option you want. Once you pick that up, you go next. This just tells you, what's kind of what the wizard is and help, and so on. There is a bug. You'll have to resize this to be able to see the connect button. We're going to fix that. Then you have to connect. This will connect me to the database, so I can actually see it in the drop-down. So I selected VSTS. And then you just go next. This is the shared server that I mentioned when we do the backup. This is where it would be saved. So you have to configure that. And that's just any shared, just a shared file. Doesn't have to be nothing fancy there. You go next. There's, like I mentioned, 3 ways to authenticate with Windows Azure to get access. I already have the subscription set up with my management certificate. But you do have the option to log into the portal. And again, you have to resize this window to be able to see it. I lost my window. It's right here. So you just have to resize this slightly. So you'll see that. And then what you'll do next is you go and, like I said, you can sign in to the portal. I'm not going to go there because I already have the management certificate configured. And then you go next. This takes a little time. The reason the subscription I'm using has a lot of cloud services, I think I have over 300, and probably hundreds of VMs. So that has a lot of stuff. So this takes a few seconds just kind of to parse and build the tree behind the scenes. But then eventually it comes back, and then you can select the cloud service where you want to deploy. And in this case, I want to deploy to the machine 3, if you remember. So I go here. Once it refreshes, I should see it here in the drop-down, and I'll pick the cloud service. There are a couple of scenarios. You could build a machine from scratch, or you can deploy your database to an existing VM that you've already set up. Okay? In this case, because provisioning takes a few minutes, I'm not going to do the build the machine from scratch. I'm just going to deploy to an existing machine that already has SQL installed. So it seems like it's done. So I can pick here and just, I know which one I want to deploy to. So I'm going to pick 3 because that's the one I'm targeting. It goes and, again, try to figure out all the VMs available. I have a VM set up, so I'm going to select that. That's actually 3. And here, what you need to do is you need to log in to VM3's database. And that's the port I was referring to earlier, 11435. Now it's found the instance of the database in VM3 that I had configured, and you do next. At this point, it gives you a summary. It says this is what you're about to do. The name of the machine, the cloud service, and so on. And then you say, yep, I'm good with it. Go finish, and then you will start the process. So at this point, it's doing all that diagram, stuff that I was showing. It's getting the connection, setting it up, doing the backup, transferring the backup, reconfiguring the machine, copying the backup, recreating the database, and setting it up. Okay, that's all happens during this time. And you can see the steps here. Once they are passed, you will get an indicator on the progress. It doesn't take that long, less than a minute. And then we're going to go to, while it's happening, I'm going to go to the portal, and I'm going to show I'm almost done. I'm going to show what the database on VM3. So I'm going to remote log into VM3 and go here, log in. And the other one should be ongoing. We're almost done. Actually, we're on the last 2 steps. All right, last step is done. So here at the end, I mentioned you get a log, and there is a link to it. I'm doing both of these at the same time. So here is the VM3, but let's take a look at the log. In this case, everything is successful. Basically, you just get all the steps. But if there is something failure, you'll get this log that, to help you figure out if, for example, the machine you picked is not the right one or whatever the failure is. And then finally, we'll just go to VM3, go to SSMS, and then we should be able to see that database. Now, you may be asking, if I already deployed like the VSTS database that I picked, can I deploy it again? Yes, you can deploy an unlimited number of times. We do have a restriction right now of 10 gigabytes of a database, but the size will increase in the future. So here I'm connecting. What it does, if you have multiple deployments, it will just version them. So you can see I've already done a couple earlier this afternoon to test it. So I had VSTS and I have VSTS 01. I think it versions it like it just adds 01, 01, 102. Pretty much it for this demo. Okay, I think we go back. And that's all I have. So we can switch back to Chuck. I think going over some other stuff before we wrap up.
Yep, just got a couple things to talk through real quick. So high availability and disaster recovery. We talked about the need for high availability, or we talked about in different cases here, we touched on high availability. You have things at the infrastructure level, the affinity group, the availability set. The availability set is what gives you the multiple machines that are tied together, so Azure knows these two are in a set. To hit the Azure SLAs, you actually have to have 2 machines running the same role. Otherwise, we don't guarantee the SLA. You tie those together with your availability sets. And between the affinity groups and the availability sets, you can check the update and fault domains that your machines are in. Azure will deal with spreading them out appropriately so that they aren't going to both intentionally be taken down at the same time. Then there's the database level stuff. Always on availability groups. You can do availability groups in Azure Virtual Machines right now with one exception. You cannot do a listener. We do not have a floating IP. Remember, each machine can only have one IP address. So there's a way you can configure availability groups to still react to client connections like database mirroring. That works great with the auto failover. It works beautifully. And you can do replication. You can do log shipping still up there. You can also do an availability group between on-prem and the cloud if you'd like to. So now the last thing I want to touch on here real quick is business intelligence. I gave a session this morning on business intelligence, on running BI and IaaS. For the gallery image, there is the SQL Server gallery image comes with SSAS and SSRS in native mode installed. The AS instance is multidimensional. But the bits for installing SQL Server are on the C drive. So you can actually do another install and install a tabular instance. The native mode is not configured for RS. It's just installed and ready to go. You're using the exact same tools that you're used to using on-prem. It's really, really straightforward. Like I said, the only difference here is the VM is hosted in the cloud. You can also build your own environment. This I talked through this morning. There's a paper on MSDN about how to do this with a single server for a dev and test environment in IaaS, and watch SQLcat.com toward the end of July, early August for some additional information on building your own BI environment using SharePoint, Power Pivot, Power View, SQL Server in infrastructure as a service. That will be coming, like I said, late July, early August is what we're targeting right now. Related content, a lot of these sessions have passed already. I have to apologize, they put us late in the week. We're hoping that this session be like early on the first day, so all the rest of the sessions will be coming up. But we do have at 1 o'clock tomorrow a session with the engineering team. It's a roundtable Q&A session. If you have questions about anything related to SQL Server and IaaS, the brain power that's going to be in that room is going to be amazing. Okay? Do you know what room it's in? Yes, performance tuning at 10 o'clock. Right after lunch, we'll do the panel discussion. Yes, everything has been recorded so that the ones that have already passed off of this, you can see them on the recordings. 386, 1 o'clock, if you want to talk to the engineering team. We're going to have a moderated roundtable session. Where to find us? Tomorrow morning, I'll be down in the booth. A lot of us are hanging out in the booth down on the show floor. I know it's going to be the last day tomorrow, so it's the morning and then the session in the afternoon. I'll come back. We'll do some Q&A, but there's a little housekeeping I'll do here at the end. And this is very important. Please fill out your evaluations. The numbers, they ask you to rate it by number. That's for the conference organizers. The comments are for us. If you have something that you liked, please tell us so we can keep doing it. If there's something you didn't like, please tell us so we can stop doing it. Okay? With that, we got a couple minutes for Q&A if anyone has any questions. I know we've had some questions along the way. It's been a lot of information. It's late in the day. Well, if I don't have any questions, thank you for coming. Enjoy the rest of TechEd. Have fun tonight.
Thank you.